Let's do this!
Hey, I'm Jacob.
And I'm Tyler.
And we are
Cart Collectors.
So today we're going to be reviewing the game Animaniacs on the Sega Genesis. It was released in 1994 by Konami, who also developed games such as Light Force on the NES, Contra on the NES, or Turtles in Time on the Super Nintendo.
Along with many, many other
As long
games.
as so many games.
Like Double Dribble on the Genesis.
No one cares.
So as far as first impressions go on this game, it's kind of hard to accurately say because this is a game that I always remember having. Like, when I was, 4 or 5 years old, we had the Genesis, we had Animaniacs, Sonic, Lost Vikings, and, some others. So, but from what I can remember of playing it as a kid, I remembered it being, really colorful and cheerful and fun and goofy, and it just... I didn't watch the Animaniacs really much as a kid.
I was lucky enough to watch it fairly often on Saturday mornings.
Yeah, but I knew about Animaniacs, and I knew about, Kids WB and all that stuff. So there was a natural draw to it, and so it was just an appealing game for me when I was a kid. And then, it's just one of those games that I have some nostalgia for.
If you don't know the cartoon, Animaniacs is based off 3 characters, Yakko, Wakko, and Dot. The story goes that in the 1930s they were locked up in the Warner Brothers water tower. And in the 1990s, they escaped and wreaked havoc among all the studio employees. In the video game, you follow the three Warner siblings going from studio to studio, or level to level, trying to collect different props. And throughout the entire game, though, Ralph the security guard is trying to stop you and throw you back into the water tower. And of course, Pinky and the Brain make an appearance to try to prevent you from getting those props while trying to take over the world.
As far as graphics go, I feel that they're very bright, they're cheery, colorful, and fun. And I feel like they're also in line with what you would expect for Sega Genesis graphics. And another thing I like about the graphics is that you're never questioning what an item or an object or a character is. It's clear, this is a bird, this is an apple, this is a crate. So that's nice, and I just feel like overall they did a good job and that the graphics are good but not great.
Animaniacs is a side-scrolling platformer game with some puzzle elements. It bears resemblance to the Lost Vikings, where there's 3 characters, each with a specific role to make it through each level. Yakko, he has a paddle ball which temporarily stuns enemies, and he can also move crates. Wakko, he has a big hammer which can break boulders, it can press switches, and it can also set off bombs. And Dot, she blows kisses which infatuates enemies and manipulates them.
In regards of enemies, there aren't really any true enemies, such as Goombas and Koopas in Mario, or bad guys in a beat-em-up. Basically what it is that there's characters that interact with the scenery around you, and they cause reactions such as barrels to come tumbling at you, or drinking glasses falling down, or rocks falling down on you as you're trying to platform. So there's not really any one enemy that is set out to get you, with the exception of Ralph, who is, honestly, he's just trying to do his job. So he's really the only one that's geared towards getting you. And then as far as the bosses for the levels go, the first 3 level bosses are all different encounters with Ralph. The first one is a scene where you're on the bottom half of the screen and he's on the top half. And he's moving around left and right, throwing bombs up while you're underneath, with 2 basically seesaws where you can use Wakko to hammer them and have a ball come up and hit Ralph. And you do this a few times, and he'll come down and he'll run by, Pinky and Brain will run by, and that warns you that Ralph is coming by, and you try to paddle ball him to get it to go back up, and you just repeat. And he's pretty easy, he's not too hard. And then the next one is you are basically just trying to avoid him and ascend to the top of that room to leave the room and just, it's an avoidance with Ralph. And then the third one is the Wild West level where you are trying to, he is in the background and you're in the foreground on a train, and there's a few different parts to it. One of the parts is you're using Wacko to hit the switch and have pies fly and hit him and knock him off his cart, and then the second part of it is he's on the left side and you're on the right side, and you're trying to speed up the front of the train so he can't catch up with you. And it's really challenging and difficult, but it makes sense, and there's a good variety to the Ralph fights. And then the fourth one, you'd expect Ralph, you don't get him. It's actually a Dracula boss where you just try to hit switches to make him fall down on his butt and get hurt. And it's as simple as that, pretty enjoyable. And then the final boss is actually Pinky and Brain, who form a Frankenstein suit to try to beat you. And you infatuate him to manipulate him to drop bombs that don't blow up, push the bombs in front of him with Yakko, blow him up with Wacko, repeat, try not to get hit. Hopefully you beat the game. And I mean, it's an interesting variety in how you use your characters together to beat the bosses and advance through the levels.
The difficulty of Animaniacs is pretty fair. There's no real game over, you just begin at the very beginning of the level. It can be frustrating, especially if you're on the boss of the level, but again, it's pretty fair. If you collect 100 stars, you'll get an extra life, and there's also some really well-placed extra lives throughout the levels. There's also a difficulty setting, which, depending on what one you choose, it will give you more lives or less lives at the beginning of the level. Also, there's a password system, which is pretty easy to know. Use the 3 different characters and blank tiles. It makes sense, it's easy. But in short, it's a pretty fair game, but it just can be frustrating at some points.
One thing I like about this game is that it's a game where if you go to options, you can change the controls. So if you want to make jump C, if you want to make the action button A, you can put the button layout to the way that you like. So that is a good thing in terms of control. One of the bad things with control, though, is it's difficult to switch between your different Animaniacs in the heat of the moment, and sometimes you end up taking damage, and it feels it's frustrating. But at the same time, another issue there is when you switch, like if you get hit and you flash like you do in many games when you take a hit and you're trying to switch, it's really hard to visually see that your characters are switching, so you think you'll be switching to Wacko to use your hammer when really you're on Yakko and you're using your paddle ball. So with that, the control isn't great, but the controls make sense and it's easy to pick up.
For final thoughts, honestly, I feel like the whole game was pretty solid.
Yeah, it's one thing that was refreshing about it was that it was a TV show that was adapted to a video game that was actually done pretty well, so props to Konami on that.
Yeah. One big thing that I noticed throughout the game, like we mentioned, was the fact that it's a platformer but has 3 different characters that all have unique roles. And you don't see that super often in platformers, but... We had pointed out Lost Vikings as the comparison, and it is a pretty fair comparison because they all have their unique abilities, as Jake said. Right. But overall, it's a really solid game. It's enjoyable, it's bright, it's pretty fun. It can be frustrating. But, I mean, that makes a good game if it's a little bit frustrating. Right, and it's one I would recommend. Yep, me too. So... That's pretty much it for this one. Yep, stay tuned for the ratings card. Yep, that'll be right after the credits if you're interested in seeing how we felt this game stacked up in each category. And just thank you for watching. Yep, thank you. So I'm Tyler. And I'm Jacob. And we are Card Collectors. Bye. See ya.